Om Sang Saraswati Namaha. Namaste. Namaste. The story of Satya Vrat. It means the one of true vows. There was once a king named Varuna, born in the lineage of the descendants of Ikshvaku. Varuna means love. And Varuna's love is different from the love of passion and attachment. It is the love which makes men divine. Varuna was such a wonderful king, and he had so much love that ultimately he became the charioteer of Surya, the sun. His kind of love can be the driver of the conveyance of the light of wisdom, so his is the universal love based in wisdom. Varuna came to the earth several generations after Ikshvaku had lived and was born in the house of the solar dynasty. Varuna was a very righteous king. He treated his subjects like his own family and always made decisions on the basis of equity, fairness, and justice. He was a valiant and noble king who constantly acted with compassion and universal love and was never selfish. He had a son by the name of Satya Vrat, one who is true to his vow. Satya Vrat grew up in the palace, but even though his name was the one who is true to his vow, he was always in trouble. He would run around with his friends and create havoc. Wherever he went, he would create another problem. In this way, the child grew up always being scolded, but he was very true to his vows. One day, when Satya Vrat was just a teenager, he came by a village of Brahmins as they were conducting a marriage ceremony. Satya Vrat rode in his own chariot, picked up the bride, put her in the chariot, and rode off with her. The Brahmins cried aghast, "Oh my God, we are doomed!" The whole village went to the king, including all the pundits and Brahmin priests, and said, "Varuna, O king, you are such a gracious and loving, generous and wise father to your children. What are we to do? The duty of the king is to protect the citizens. Yet here is your son, the heir to the throne, stealing away a Brahmin girl on the day of her wedding. We want justice. Who is going to protect us if the king does not? Your son is the culprit. What a horrible fate to have our girl stolen away on the day of her wedding." The king called Satya Vrat. "Satya Vrat, what have you to say for yourself?" Satya Vrat replied, "Father, it wasn't all that bad." "Why not?" "Well, according to Hindu law, the marriage is not complete until the bride and groom have taken 7 steps around the fire. Seeing as they hadn't taken the 7 steps yet, I'm not guilty of stealing the bride. According to our Hindu law, she wasn't married." "King, this will not do," the Brahmins complained. The king turned to his guru, Vasishtha, and asked, "O respected guru, what should be done for the peace and harmony of my kingdom?" Vasishtha thought for a moment and said, "King, having a son who causes difficulties to your subjects is worse than having no son at all. Exile the son to the forest." Under orders from the king, Satya Vrat was exiled to the forest. Satya Vrat sat alone in the forest under a tree and thought, "Am I really so unworthy that my father would throw me out of the kingdom? I can't even go home. Now I have no father, I have no mother, I have no friends, I have nothing to eat. What am I going to do out here by myself?" I don't know how to do japa. I don't know any mantras. I don't know anything about all that tapasya stuff. But right now I am making one vow. I am going to really be Satya Vrat. I will speak the truth and I will do what I say. Satya Vrat began to live in the forest. He made a bow and some arrows and used them to hunt in the woods. In this way, he forgot all about the kingdom, and he never told a lie. He lived very simply in the forest amidst nature, just taking the minimum necessities of life. Some years passed. Then came a great famine. There was drought in the entire land. Vishwamitra's wife was alone in a hermitage with all their children, while her husband was away in another land, deep in meditation. As the days of drought and famine went on, she saw her children crying out because of hunger. She thought, what am I to do? First, I was living peacefully in this ashram with my children. My husband was off meditating, and I could pick fruits and herbs from the forest. With that, I could feed my family. But now there are no more fruits and herbs in the forest. My children are crying out in hunger. What shall I do? I have no choice but to sell one of my sons. If I get some money, I'll take that money and feed the other children. Resolving thusly, she took a rope and put it around her son's neck and started to lead him to the marketplace. The child was crying, and the mother also was sad. Just as they were approaching the edge of the forest, Satya Vrat saw this pitiful sight and said, "Lady, what are you doing? Why is your son crying like that?" The Muni's wife replied, "O Prince, we have nothing to eat and we have no money. My children are crying out for want of food, so I have determined to sell this one son so I can feed the other children." Satya Vrat said, "Oh lady, that's a terrible thing to do. Please don't do this. Go back to your ashram. I am a hunter, and every day I'll put some meat on the tree outside your ashram. You can cook the meat and feed your family. Every day I will provide you something. This is my vow. I am Satya Vrat, one who is truthful to his vows." Vishwamitra's wife was ecstatic with joy. She took the rope off her son's neck and led him back to the ashram. Every day Satya Vrat would hunt in the forest, and he would find a rabbit or a bird or some kind of animal. He would shoot the animal with his arrows and cut off a piece of meat for himself, and the rest he would hang from the tree outside the Muni's ashram. And every day Vishwamitra's wife would come to the tree where she would find a piece of meat. And she would take it down and prepare it and cook it to feed her children. In this way, a long period passed, but still it didn't rain. One day, Satya Vrat didn't find any game in the forest. He searched the entire forest, but he couldn't find anything. He thought, what should I do? Should I give her a piece of my own flesh to eat? I have a vow to provide her with something to eat. How can I forsake my vow? Just as he was thinking about this, he looked over in a thicket and saw there was a cow. Not only was it a cow, but the cow belonged to Vasishtha Muni. He thought, that cow belongs to the same Vasishtha who advised my father to exile me from the kingdom. I am angry with him anyway. There's a cow and I need to give some meat to the Muni's wife. And he took his arrow and without further thought, he shot the cow. He cut up the meat and hung it from the tree. Vishwamitra's wife, without thinking that it might be cow's meat, came and took the meat down from the tree. She prepared it, served it to her children, and also ate of it herself. Unknowingly, they all ate the cow's meat. Vasishtha started to look for his cow, but he didn't find her anywhere. He called and searched and looked everywhere for the cow, but he didn't find the cow at all. Then he sat down in meditation and saw that Satya Vrat had killed the cow. That no good exiled prince, that brat of a prince who is always in trouble, he killed my cow. Vasishtha got very angry with the prince, and he took some water in his hand and said, Satya Vrat, I pronounce a curse on you. You become Trishanku. Three means number 3, and Shanku means a mark of leprosy. And Shanku bears 3 marks of leprosy. Vasishtha threw the water which bound the curse, and immediately Shanku broke out with 3 marks of leprosy on his forehead. He had a horrible appearance, and he was extremely pained. What a horrible curse of leprosy I have received, exclaimed Satya Vrat. It was really no fault of my own. I had to protect my vow by providing some meat to the Muni's wife. Shanku remained in the forest. One day, as he was chasing a wild pig, he heard the pig groan, eh? And Shanku's thought, what kind of noise is this, eh? For some reason, he started to repeat the syllable, eh? And Shanku started to say, eh. Without understanding what he was saying or what it meant, he continued to recite the strange sound he learned from the pig. Then, one day, the goddess Saraswati came to bless him. She said, Shanku, you have been faithful to your vow, and you have not transgressed the truth. What would you like from me? And Shanku said, I want to have my beautiful body back and get rid of this leprosy. I want my father to give me my kingdom back, and I don't want to be an outcast living alone in the forest anymore. Saraswati said, Tathastu, I grant you that boon. Even now, your father's ministers are on the way to come to find you. Saraswati dissolved inside, and Shanku began to shine with his beautiful appearance again. Just then, the king's ministers found the prince in the forest. They said, Oh, prince, your father has been so anxious for you. Please come home. The prince was pleased to return with them. When Shanku, Satya Vrat, came to the edge of the kingdom, his father rode out of the city to greet him. He said, My son, I have been so concerned about you. My time has come to go to the forest to perform tapasya. Now you take charge of the kingdom. I am going to perform the spiritual discipline by which I can ascend to my heavenly abode. So Satya Vrat was crowned the king, and he began to reign over his kingdom. One day, Satya Vrat went to the Guru Vasishtha and said, Guruji, Vasishtha Muni, please perform the sacrifice by which I too can ascend to heaven. Vasishtha said, that is not possible. You were a brat as a child. You were always in trouble. You disobeyed. You stole the Brahmin's wife. You killed my cow. You are a sinner and you can't go to heaven. Especially not right now. Why can't I go to heaven right now? No one can go to heaven with an earthly body. So, if you behave yourself for the rest of your life and don't sin anymore, then we can perform a sacrifice for you so that after you leave this earthly body, you can go to heaven. But the body will stay here. No one can take their body to heaven. Satyavrat again requested, Maharishi, Guruji, great wise one, you know all the sacrifices. Why don't you perform the sacrifice so I can go to heaven right now? Vasishtha again replied, I already told you that is impossible. Nobody can go to heaven with their body right now. Wait until you leave this body and then maybe you can go to heaven if your karma is perfect. Satyavrat said, Guruji, you're just picking on me. You didn't like me from my childhood. It was you who advised my father to exile me from the kingdom. It was you who cursed me to become afflicted with leprosy. If you don't do this sacrifice for me right now, then I'll have to find another guru to do it for me. But I want to go to heaven with my body. Vasishtha said, you were a foolish child and nothing has changed at all. Now you are behaving like a Chandala, an outcast, and I curse you. You shall become a Chandala. Vasishtha took some water in his hand and he threw it at Satyavrat. Immediately, the crown fell from his head, Satyavrat's golden ornaments fell off, his silken robes became tattered rags, and he became the most wretched and decrepit. He said, oh my gosh, I am doomed. I can't let my subjects to see me like this. What a disgrace. Satyavrat had one son named Harishchandra. He called his young son Harishchandra and said, son, see the terrible condition that has afflicted me. You take over the leadership of the affairs of state. I am going to the forest to perform prayaschit, the tapasya of repentance, and I will try to find some way to relieve this terrible condition. Satyavrat goes to heaven. Harishchandra was crowned as the king. Satyavrat, Trishanku, now suffering in a deplorable condition, went to the forest in great sorrow and pain. Some years passed. Vishwamitra returned to his hermitage after practicing tapasya. When he saw his wife, his heart melted. He said, my wife, tell me how you passed the days of the drought and famine. How did you survive? I myself was stricken with a terrible condition. At one time I found myself so hungry, I broke into the house of a Chandala. And I went directly into his kitchen where I saw a little bit of leftovers of some dog meat he had cooked some days before. I reached into the pot to eat it. Just then the Chandala came home. He said, oh Brahman, what are you about to do? I replied, I am in great pain from my hunger, so I am going to steal this dog meat from a Chandala and eat it so that I can save my body. The Chandala said, "Oh, Brahmin, learned that you are, please stop. Don't do that. My life is defiled. I am unclean. I am unworthy to provide food for a Brahmin. The pots and utensils are unclean. The meat itself is unclean. It is not befitting a Brahmin. Please don't eat defiled food, because it is written, he who eats defiled food becomes defiled himself. Don't sacrifice your noble birth as a Brahmin to become a Chandala in your next life." Again I replied, "My first obligation is to preserve my life." Existentialism at its finest. Shanta would be so proud of him. "Because this human life gives me the opportunity to perform the sadhana, the spiritual discipline by which God realization is obtained, I am required to protect my life. If I commit any offense in doing so, then I can always perform some tapasya of repentance. But if I allow this human life to slip through my fingers before my goal of perfection of realization is reached, then I will be guilty of a greater crime." The Chandala said, "O noble Brahmin, be that as it may, I am requesting you, please don't commit this sin of stealing defiled meat from a defiled being and eating the dog meat of a Chandala. Surely the gods will help you in your plight." Again I replied, "I cannot wait any longer for the gods to help me. I am very disturbed by these pangs of hunger. Now I must take some nourishment for this body. I will eat the meat." Just then a bolt of lightning flew across the heavens. The clouds began to thunder and the rain fell. I put down the meat and ran outside and raised my arms up to the heavens and rejoiced. The gods had sent rain. The drought was over. The famine was finished. And therefore, my dear wife, I came home to see how you and the children got along during the period of drought. The Muni's wife said, "Husband, I too was very perplexed by hunger. It was most pitiful to hear the cries of my children who were hungry. They kept saying, 'Mother, give us something to eat.' At first I gathered wild rice and grains from the forest, but then there was none. Then I gathered berries and fruits, but then they too were finished. Then I gathered roots, but they became exhausted as well. And when my children were crying so pitifully for food, I was in such a detestable state that I did not know what to do. Then I decided to sell one of our sons. Perhaps a rich man would purchase him, and with the proceeds of the sale I could buy some food to keep the others alive. Just as I was en route to the marketplace, Satya Vrat came and said, 'Oh, dear one, do not commit this horrible act. I will provide meat for your family every day so long as the famine lasts.' Every day I went outside the ashram and found a piece of meat tied to the tree. But then one day, quite unknowingly, that Prince Satya Vrat killed Vashishta's cow. For this, Vashishta cursed him to be a Chandala, and again he was exiled from the kingdom. And now, my husband, we must do something to repay the kindness of Satyavrat. Vishwamitra immediately went to where Satyavrat was staying in the forest. He said, Satyavrat, you appear to be in a detestable condition. How did you get to be like this? I went to my guru and said, Vashishta, please perform the sacrifice by which I can ascend to heaven in this body. And when Vashishta refused, I said, Vashishta, if you don't do this sacrifice for me, then I will have it performed by some other guru. Whereupon Vashishta cursed me to become a Chandala. And now you see my pitiful condition. I can never go to heaven with this despicable body. Vishwamitra said, I personally will send you to heaven right now with this very body. You have done such a great service to my family, and thereby you have become my great benefactor. I will see that you get to heaven. Bring me the articles needed for sacrifice. Satyavrat began to collect all the required articles, and he brought them to the sacrificial altar. Vishwamitra invited all the other munis, come to the sacrifice. But Vashishta ordered them, don't anybody go. And no munis would disobey Vashishta's order. Then Vishwamitra said, Satyavrat, sit by the sacrificial dais. We will make this sacrifice by ourselves. Satyavrat sat down while Vishwamitra enkindled the sacred fire. He began to recite the mantras and he said, go up, Satyavrat, go to heaven. Immediately, Satyavrat lifted off the earth and began to ascend to the heavens. He moved up through the clouds, through the atmosphere, and he moved towards the heavens. Some of the gods were sitting near the door of heaven and said, Indra, look at that Chandala, that outcast, that defiled being is coming up to heaven. Indra came running to the gate and said, Satyavrat, Trishanku in a Chandala form, what are you doing here? Go back to earth. No Chandala can come through the gate of heaven. And Satyavrat started to fall. He fell through the clouds, and as he approached the earth, he started screaming, Vishwamitra, Vishwamitra, save me, I'm falling. And Vishwamitra called out, stop! I sent you to heaven. No one has the authority to disallow you. Go back to heaven. Immediately, Trishanku began to rise into the air. As he pushed through the clouds, he came near to the gate of heaven, and Indra said, what are you doing back here? I sent you to earth. Go back. Again, Satyavrat started to fall. Then Vishwamitra said, stop! And Indra said, stop! And there was Satyavrat, stuck in the atmosphere, halfway between heaven and earth. He could neither go up, nor could he go down. He was stuck in the middle. Vishwamitra said, Indra, you take this man to heaven. Indra said, he is a Chandala, an outcast, in a despicable body. There is no way he is coming to heaven. You take him back to earth. In great anger, Vishwamitra replied, all right, we'll see about this. He began to recite the Gayatri mantra. Om Bhur Bhuvasvaha Tatsa Vitur Parinyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimati Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. And he made offerings to the sacred fire, Swaha, and said, all the merits which I have obtained from all the tapasya that I have performed, I give to Trishanku. Now, Trishanku, go to heaven. Indra said, he can't come in. Vishwamitra began to chant the Gayatri mantra once again. "What are you doing?" asked Indra. Vishwamitra replied, "I am making a new creation with a new heaven and a new Indra. If Satyavrat is not welcoming your heaven, then I will send him to that heaven." Indra said, "Stop. We don't need a new creation. I don't want another heaven with another Indra. I'll allow Satyavrat into this heaven, but not with that body. Let him have a divine body and then he can enter." There, in the middle of the atmosphere, was Satyavrat was suspended. He suddenly became endowed with a beautiful, healthy, divine body. He was dressed in silken garments and golden ornaments. Indra sent the devas with a chariot that flies through the air, and Satyavrat sat down as they escorted him up to Indra's heaven. Indra gave him a place in heaven because of the strength of Vishwamitra's tapasya. Varuna grants Harishchandra a son. After Satyavrat ascended into heaven, Harishchandra, his son, began to rule in his place as the king of Ayodhya, the king of the solar dynasty. Harishchandra was the most truthful, the most just, the most generous king that Ayodhya had ever seen. Of all the kings of the solar dynasty, Harishchandra was a gem. His community was very prosperous and the citizens lived in peace and contentment in every way. But Harishchandra didn't have a child. He thought to himself, "It says in our scriptures that if you don't have a son who can perform the funeral rites when you leave this earth, then you can't go to heaven. Who will offer pindas, the funeral cakes at the annual memorial ceremonies? How can I go to heaven if I don't have a son? There won't be anyone to care for me. Who will be the heir to my throne? My people will be without a leader, without a protector, without a defender. My whole kingdom may be overrun by thieves or enemies. There will be no one to guard the peace, no one to maintain the prosperity. I personally will not attain salvation. I had better go to my guru, Vasishtha, and ask him what to do." Thus reasoning, Harishchandra went to Vasishtha and said, "Vasishtha, with your blessings I have become very successful as a king. But as a human being, I am doomed to damnation. I don't have a son to succeed me. What shall I do?" Vasishtha said, "Worship Varuna, the Lord of the waters. Varuna, being pleased, will grant you a son." Harishchandra went off to perform tapasya. He started to meditate and to perform various forms of yoga. In many ways, he worked to propitiate the Lord Varuna. After some time, Varuna came to him and said, "What would you like?" Harishchandra replied, "Lord, there is nothing so painful as to not have a son. Please, Lord, bless me with a son." And Varuna said, "What will you do for me if I give you a son?" Harishchandra replied, "Anything you want." Then Varuna said, "If I give you a son, I want you to give the son back to me. I want you to sacrifice the son." Harishchandra assented. "There is nothing worse than not having a son. Certainly I will do whatever you ask. Give me a son and I will sacrifice him to you just as you request. I am Harishchandra, the king who always keeps his word. This is my vow. This is my promise." Varuna said, "Tathastu. I grant you the boon. I grant you a son." Harishchandra went home and soon his wife was pregnant with a child. The king's joy knew no bounds, unlimited joy. He summoned the Brahmins and performed the prenatal ceremonies. In the 5th month of his wife's pregnancy, he performed the Simantanayan, the parting of the hairs of his wife. He placed sindoor in her hair, a bright red vermilion powder, and offered moduparka for her to drink, a cold drink made of yogurt, ghee, honey, and sugar, and he blessed her. In the 7th month, he performed more ceremonies, and when the child came out of the womb, Harishchandra's pleasure knew no limits. Just then, Varuna came and said, "And now you have a son. O king, you who are truthful to your vow, sacrifice the son, give him back to me." And the king thought for a moment and then said, "Lord, this child has just come into the world. He hasn't even had the blessing of a birth celebration. How can you sacrifice a child who hasn't had a birth celebration? This is unheard of in the scriptures. Lord, let me just please perform the Jata Karma, the birth ceremony, and then I'll perform your sacrifice just as I promised." Varuna said, "That sounds like a wise idea. Go ahead, perform the Jata Karma." Then the king of Harishchandra invited many Brahmins to assemble, and they chanted the sacred mantras and blessed the child. Harishchandra gave great gifts to many people. He was so happy. When the celebration was completed, Varuna came and said, "All right, king, perform the sacrifice." Immediately the joy fled from the king's mind, and he was oppressed by sorrow and beset by thought. "Oh, what shall I tell him now? There is nothing more painful than not having a son. How can I sacrifice the son who has come to me through the blessing of God? I only have one son." He said, "Varuna, you are the knower of Dharma. I have just a small intellect in comparison to the magnitude of all your vast knowledge. You know the right way to perform Dharma. But let me just ask you this question. When we perform any Vedic sacrifice, both the wife and the husband should be participants. It is not according to rule for just the husband to perform any sacrifice alone. The wife is known as Bhagidar, the equal co-sharer. So how can we perform a sacrifice where the wife can't come? Now, it says in the scriptures that 10 days after a child has taken birth, the father becomes pure. In the case of a woman, the time limit stipulated is 30 days. So, Varuna, if it meets your approval, just wait until the end of the month when my wife will become pure, and then together we can perform the sacrifice. Varuna said, "Well, that sounds like a very amicable arrangement. I have no difficulty, but just make sure you keep your word." Harishchandra's heart leapt for joy. He was so happy. In a flash, the 30 days went by. Harishchandra said, "The day has come to give my child a name." He went to his guru, Vasishtha, and they examined the astrological charts prepared for the birth of the new child. They gave him the name Rohitashva, the red horse. Rohi has another meaning, the rising sun. The horse who shines like the rising sun, or the sun, or well, let's read what it says. When the gods and demons turned the Kshir Samudra, the ocean of milk, many beings came out from that ocean. After Mahalakshmi came Uchayshravish, the Ashwa, or horse, which embodies all wisdom. So here is Rohitashva, the horse, the embodiment of the wisdom which radiates like the rising sun. This was the meaning of the name given to the child. Harishchandra celebrated the rite of passage for the naming of his child. and made a feast for his entire kingdom, giving great dakshinas as gifts to the Brahmins. They had performed all the ceremonies and the fire sacrifice, singing songs of joy and gladness, when Varuna came and said, "O king, fulfill your vow, sacrifice the child." Harishchandra said, "Lord, I am ready right at this very moment to do exactly as you say. But first I want your opinion on one question of the law of our Dharma. It is said that in order for a victim to be fit for a sacrifice, he must have some teeth. How can you sacrifice an animal that doesn't have any teeth?" Now I see that is written right here in the scripture. "Lord, if you think this is wrong, tell me and I'll perform the sacrifice right now. But if you are in agreement with the scriptures, just wait 6 months until we perform his annaprashan, the eating of his first food after his teeth have come. Then we will perform the sacrifice without any hesitation. But I don't want to give you an improper victim for your sacrifice." Varuna said, "King, I think you are putting me off. Be sure you don't get too much attached to this child of yours. I grant your wish. Go ahead and perform the child's annaprashan, the first eating of solid food, and then we'll have the sacrifice." Varuna disappeared, and Harishchandra was full of joy. He began to play with his child and to watch the child grow. 6 months passed by. The Brahmins convened to perform the sacrifice and chant the mantras that accompany the feeding of the first rice. The child was eating his first meal when Varuna came. "Okay, king, perform the sacrifice now." And that king replied, "Lord Varuna, you know the child still has the hair on his head that he had when he was born. How can I sacrifice to you an impure victim like that? Let me first perform his churakarn ceremony and take off all the hair from his head. Then he will be a fit victim for sacrifice. This I promise you." And Varuna replied, "See that your words do not become untrue. Don't tell lies to me. I grant you the boon, shave the child's head, and then we will perform the sacrifice." The time went by, and they shaved the child's head, and Varuna came and said, "All right, king, give me the child." Harishchandra said, "Varuna, I am sure you know that in a sacrifice of this nature, only one who is twice born is fit to be the victim offered to God. Let me first perform his upanayan ceremony, which confers upon him the sacred thread and make him twice born, and then I will perform your sacrifice without hesitation. You must take initiation in the Gayatri mantra." Varuna said, "King, I think you are getting very much attached to this child. You seem to be leading me on and stalling me with one excuse after the other. But I allow this delay. Go ahead and perform the Yajnapavitam ceremony and make him twice born. Give him the sacred thread and initiate him into the Gayatri mantra. It is written that for a Brahmin child, the appropriate age is 8. For Kshatriya children, the age is 11. For Vaishya children, the age is 12. And for Shudra children, the age is 15. Therefore, go ahead and perform the Upanayan ceremony." Harishchandra was very happy. Time went by very quickly. When Harishchandra performed the Upanayan ceremony for his son, Varuna came and said, "Make the sacrifice." And Harishchandra replied, "Lord, the only really fitting victim for your sacrifice will be one who is knowledgeable. Why would you allow the sacrifice of an ignorant child? Only the child who is knowledgeable may be a fit offering. Certainly that should be the criteria. First, let the child study with his guru after his Samavartan ceremony. After he returns from the guru's home having studied the Vedas, then let him come into the sacrifice and I will offer him for sure. Varuna said, "Make no mistake, king, if you do not follow every letter of what you have promised me to do, I am going to curse you." Harishchandra replied, "I have never spoken a lie, and I promise you I will do as you command me to do. As soon as the child returns from his guru's ashram, we will perform the sacrifice." Varuna said, "Okay, send the child to be educated, but make no mistake. You will have to perform exactly as you have promised." The child was sent to the guru's ashram. The years passed by quickly. While the child Rohitashva studied all the Vedas and the treatises on politics and economics and how to be a good father to his nation. When he had committed all of this knowledge to memory, he gave the appropriate dakshina to his guru and started on his way home. Just as he was on the way, Indra came and said, "Son, don't go there. Don't you know that if you go there, your father is going to offer you as a victim in a sacrifice? Save your life, run to the hills, hide out in a cave, and when your father dies, then we'll call you. Then you will come and inherit your kingdom. Don't give up your life right now by going to your father." When Rohitashva heard this, he became frightened, and not knowing what to do, he ran for the hills and hid out in a cave. Varuna came to the king and said, "Okay, king, it's time for your son's Samavartan ceremony. Your son should have returned by now, and the ceremony should have been completed. Perform the sacrifice as you have promised." The king answered, "O Lord, my son has not come home yet. How can I perform the sacrifice?" Varuna said, "Time after time you have put me off for one reason or the other, and now this is just another lame excuse. You have no intention of fulfilling your dharma. You have just been putting me off and lying to me time and time again. Now you perform the sacrifice, or I am going to curse you." The king said, "O Lord Varuna, I am not trying to put you off. I am telling you the truth. I have no son to sacrifice to you. Please take pity on me." Varuna said, "You are responsible for this. How can I take pity on you? I curse you. You will be afflicted with disease." And he threw some drops of water at the king Harishchandra. The king immediately became afflicted with a terrible disease which caused great pain. Some time passed while he was suffering. He was suffering the terrible pains of discomfort of the disease. News of this came to Rohitashva in the cave where he was living in the forest. He thought, "I must go to see my father who is suffering. What good is it to be a son who does not redeem the pain of his father?" He started on his journey to see his father, the king, but Indra came to him and said, "Stop, O prince! Don't go there! The only way your father can be freed from his pain is by killing you. Don't invite your own destruction. Go back to your mountain cave where you will be safe. When it is safe for you to come, then we will call you." Rohitashva became afraid and fled back to the mountain cave where he had been staying. Harishchandra remained afflicted with disease. Thereafter the king called his guru and said, "Vasishta, what shall I do? Here I am, afflicted by disease and pain, and the only way out of this is to offer my own son in sacrifice. Even so, my son is not here. Now I have no way to offer the sacrifice, but I can't stand this pain any longer. What shall I do? Vasishtha replied, King, there are many different types of sons. There is a son that is born from the union between husband and wife. There is a son that is born from knowledge by means of initiation. There is a son that is won from the spoils of war, who has been stolen by force of arms. There is a son who has been given shelter as an orphan who seeks refuge with a father. And there is a son who has been purchased by paying a fitting price. Therefore, O king, find another son. The king was ecstatic with joy. He called all the ministers and said, Ministers, go throughout the kingdom and see if anyone will sell me their son. The ministers went through the kingdom and called out, Will anyone sell their son? The king is in need of a son. Will anyone sell their son? Now, there was a poor Brahmin whose name was Ajigartha. And Ajigartha had 3 sons. Their names was Sunapuch, Sunasheba, and Sunonalangula. Because he was very poor, he was having difficulty providing food for all 3 of them. When he heard of the king's desire to purchase a son, he thought, I could sell one of my sons, and with the money I receive, I can feed the other 2. Now his oldest son was needed to perform the funeral rites when he left his body. His youngest son was too young to understand what was going on. He chose his middle son, Shudashepa, and decided to sell that son. The king asked, What will you take for your son? The Brahmin replied, 100 cows laden with gold. The king said, Sold! I give you your price. Give me the son. Shunashepa was crying in terror as they bound him to the sacrificial post. The Brahmins were reciting the mantras of the Yajna, chanting the formulas of the human sacrifice. All the rishis were present while the king was lying in the sacrificial arena, suffering in great pain. The executioner raised his sword to decapitate the victim, and the victim, Shunashepa, cried out in fear. Suddenly, the executioner put down his sword and said, O king, I cannot decapitate this victim. This young boy is crying so pitifully. Please show him mercy. The king said, Why doesn't Varuna show me mercy? I have so much pain. What will we do? Is there anyone here who will decapitate this victim and free me from my pain? Then the Brahmin Ajigartha said, O king, double your price and I'll do it myself. Everyone began to shout, Boo! What kind of father are you? You would slay your own son even when the executioner couldn't do it. And Ajigartha answered, No one knows the difficulties of poverty. Each of you is so pious because you have plenty. But to be freed of the curse of poverty, even a Brahmin can slay his own son. Give me my price and I'll perform the sacrifice. The king said, I grant you your price. Give him another 100 cows laden with gold. Ajigartha became the executioner who raised the sword over the victim, his own son. The victim was crying so pitifully. Just as he was about to strike, Vishwamitra stood up and called, Stop, O king! The king is the father of his people. The greatest virtue of a Kshatriya king is compassion. The sacred duty of a king is to protect his subjects. And here you are about to commit this terrible deed of causing a father to kill his own son. The king said, I have so much pain, this is the only way to free myself from disease. You must forgive this child called Vishwamitra. Why doesn't Varuna forgive me? Replied the king. None of this was due to any fault of mine. I am the victim of circumstances. Vishwamitra ran up to where the child Shunashepa was bound and gave him initiation in the Purana mantra by whispering the Bij mantra Bom in his ear. Shunashepa began to loudly chant the Bandhan Mukta Shukta, which became the 28th hymn of the first mandala of Rig Veda. Namo Mahabhyo, Namo Arbakebhyo, Namo Jubabhyo, Nama Asinebhyaha, Vyachama Devanjati Shaknabam, Majaya Sahasam Samabrichidevaha. I bow to the great wise beings of the past. I bow to the great wise beings of the present. I bow to the great wise beings of the future. If there are any unknown great wise beings of any time, I bow to them as well with one pointed attention. I bow to them all. Bless me, all of you. Just then, Varuna came to the sacrifice and ordered, release the child. The king replied, O Lord Varuna, if you release me from my pain and disease, I will certainly release this child. Then Varuna proclaimed, Okay, king, be free from pain. Suddenly, all of the king's disease and pain was healed. The child Shunashepa was free, and all the Brahmins in the assembly shouted with joy for triumph. Shunashepa said, O learned Brahmins, now that I am free, please tell me, to whose house shall I go? Who is my father now? And some of the Brahmins said, Ajigart is your father. Others said, Harishchandra the king paid the appropriate price for you. Go to the king's house. Vashishta stood up amidst the assembly and said, No. Vishwamitra gave him the initiation in the mantra which saved his life. Now he is your true spiritual father. You go home with Vishwamitra. Then Vishwamitra embraced Shunashepa with fatherly love, and together they returned to his house. Harishchandra completed the yajna along with all the sacrificial rites and gave great dakshinas to the Brahmins and rishis, and especially to his own guru Vashishta, and the likes of which had never been seen before. There was a great celebration throughout the kingdom. Om Sam Saraswati Namaha. Namaste. Namaste, everyone. Do we have any questions tonight?
Swamiji, a question from Kumari.
Yes, Kumari, Mom.
Sadhana include Harishchandra or tapasya of repentance? Can Swamiji please comment about this tapasya?
Yes, there is a repentance that we perform as a matter of course. Kumari Mom, when we're performing sadhana and tapasya, it is natural for us to recapitulate all of the wrongs that we have committed. So many events, so many movies come to our minds in our earlier stages of meditation. It's very, very difficult to make the mind sit still. And as we look at those old movies and see those old events, We are performing prayaschitta. We are performing the tapasya of repentance because we are edifying our resolve not to commit such fallacy again. As a matter of course, as we practice our sadhana, we will be performing the tapasya of prayaschitta, of purifying the chit. Chitta is all the objects of awareness, both subjective and objective. So we see all the events and we purify them. That's the prayash. So here, the purification of all the objects of our consciousness, all the thoughts, all the movies, all the past experience occurs as a matter of course. Vashishtha means that Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purna is the term used in Sanskrit. And if you're perfect and clear and pure and free from any selfish consideration, then you can go to heaven. You dwell in heaven. As long as you maintain selfish considerations and attachments, you are creating your own hell. This is your own purgatory. This is your own place for the redemption of your sins. Because of attachment, your mind is busy. It can't go to heaven. It's not thinking about divine thoughts. It's thinking about me and mine and my attachments. So that's what he means. Namaste, Nilima. It's written in the annals of heaven, in the rule book, that Indra won't allow low-class people or chandalas who are performing prayaschitta in their lifetime as a chandala for the sins committed in previous lifetimes. So what they're saying is, if you have the body of a chandala, it's probably because you have outstanding karma from previous lifetimes, and until that outstanding karma is not complete, you can't go to heaven. So now, complete your karma, you'll get a beautiful body, you'll get a divine body, and then you can rise to heaven with a divine body. That was Indra's exception. Because he had a chandala body, he must have been cursed for his bad deeds. Well, as it turned out, Vishwamitra blessed him for his good deeds. And Vishwamitra's blessing was stronger than Vashishtha's curse, and therefore he rose to heaven. Namaste, Parvati Ma.
Can you please explain, Swamiji, more the Upanayana ceremony and why the ages are different?
Yes, Parvati Ma, there are the investiture with the sacred thread is performed at different ages for the different castes. And that is because we tend to learn the family business from our childhood. And we learn a family trade. Now, the family trait of the Brahmins is their stock in trade is divine wisdom. So an 8-year-old Brahmin would be more capable of learning the meaning of the Gayatri Mantra and the practice of the Gayatri Mantra. Now, the Kshatriyas, the primary business is the learning of administration, of weaponry, of administering a kingdom. How to be a good king. They learn economics and politics and all of the attributes of justice and the various departments that is required to administrate a community. By the age of 12, they have a greater capacity to understand what is the Gayatri Mantra. Why are we taking this initiative? The Vaishya's primary occupation is the circulation of goods and services. So they learn about profit and loss, buying and selling, communications, transport. They learned various functions of a mercantile quality. And so by the age of 12, they are more capable. And the Shudras, their primary education is in artisanship and agriculture. And when they learn how to perform labor. So at 15 years of age, they are more capable of absorbing what is this divine knowledge that we are supposed to be making, learning to make the root of our heritage, the mula mantra of our being. It's the basic principle of our philosophy of life. That there's no place where I don't need more wisdom. Please let me listen first and speak less.
Question from Kumari. When the Aryan tribes entered India, they drove their herds of cattle with them, which were used for food. During which era of India's history did non-beef eating become the universal norm?
It is, there are two meanings for the word go. One is cow, and the other is rays of light. So Govinda is not who is one-pointed cow. He is one-pointed light. Gopala is the protector of cows. But he's also the protector of the light. The cows were the wealth of the rishis because they symbolized, give me the light. Give me the light laden with gold. It was radiant light. Fill me with the light of wisdom, the warmth of devotion. This was their constant prayer. Not necessarily that they wanted so many cows to be as a physical asset. It was a metaphysical asset. If we call this scripture, they're praying for something that's beyond this world. So now the history of how the sacrifice of cows, vegetarianism or not eating cows became important. It was always important, Kumari Mom. You see, if you kill a cow and you don't have refrigerators and freezers in which to store the meat, then that cow is good for one meal. But if the cow lives, she will give milk and yogurt and ghee and butter, and she'll feed you for a lifetime. So the tradition was always, we are keeping these cows with us as members of our family who will nourish us and we will nourish them. And it was a sympathetic relationship of mutual and reciprocal sustenance. It was different because the cow was a domestic animal for them. So they were allowed to go into the forest and hunt wild animals. And that could be used as food and food for sacrifice. But the cow was always sacred, not to be eaten, but to be provided for and to provide for it reciprocally. There was a mutual exchange of nourishment. But they didn't eat cows. Well, remember Vishwamitra was a kshatriya. So he could provide the meat. Satya Vrat was a kshatriya, so he could provide the meat. And they lived in the forest.
Question from Varuna from New Delhi. Was Varuna giving this severe test to Harishchandra because his ego got too big about being the most truthful?
That is one of the reasons that Varuna gave the test. Another reason was that he wanted to demonstrate the nature of attachment which would make any man swerve from the truth. So the truth is an extremely relative proposition, because in every circumstance it can be interpreted in a different way. And Varuna was a knower of Dharma, and he thought that Harishchandra's attachment was growing greater and greater, so that he was moving farther and farther from fulfilling his vow. Namaste, Ushama.
Why is birth considered to be impure?
Well, it's not exactly impure. It's just considered that after the birth ceremony, the mother has no work to do for 30 days. Let her sit back, relax, nourish herself, nourish her baby, spend some time bonding with her child. Remember, in joint family India, then there were so many others who could pick up the slack and take over during the times of uchishta. Times, they called it impurity, but it meant the times where you didn't want to be imposed upon. Was more the concept. Do not impose upon the mother, because remember, making worship in ancient India meant cutting the wood, harvesting the food, cooking the food, preparing the fire, sitting over fire, and it was a lot of hard work. So they said, don't impose upon the woman for 30 days after her childbearing, and let her recuperate and spend time bonding with her child.
Another question from Krishna. Swamiji, was there really human sacrifice in Vedic times?
It's not written in the Vedas other than this attempt to make not a maid. This attempt to make a human sacrifice, there is no reference to it in Vedic scripture. There is just this story that Varuna said, "Give me the sacrifice," just as Abraham was called upon to sacrifice Isaac. And the Old Testament speaks of the same thing, but he didn't do it either. Wendy, Dharma is to achieve an ideal of perfection. Whatever you define as your ideal of perfection, to become the greatest mother, to become the greatest wife, to become the greatest saint, to become an example, any way you want to phrase that ideal, that primary goal. Artha are the material resources necessary to fulfilling that goal. You need to provide food and shelter and clothing for your child. You need to provide nourishment for yourself so that you can meditate to pursue that other goal. Kama means that other desires have to be disposed of. They have to be either fulfilled or gotten rid of in some way. You forget about it. So that you have only one desire, and that desire is to fulfill that highest ideal of perfection. And moksha is the result of the completion of the first three. That's liberation, self-realization. That's where you've achieved that ideal. You have no other desires, and you have just the perfect amount of resources. Om Sang Saraswati Namaha. Namaste. Well, this story is going to go on between Vashishta and Vishwamitra. Their relationship is going to intensify even some more. We'll continue next Monday. On Saturday night, Srima's going to sing, I hope, and we'll see what other programs we'll enjoy. Namaste.